Now, I want to circle back to that in just a second because I feel like you can give us some pretty profound advice in terms of what we individually can do. You have studied, you've seen it all, you know it all. Most folks they wake up, they go to work, they get their kids from school, they go home. And like you said, it's such a far away problem for most people. But because you've seen it and because you know what can be done and what happens if we don't, I'd love to get your advice for the every man and every woman, or every person, I should say, that like what we can do in our immediate lives, but beyond recycling and whatever. So first, before we get there, I do want to share something that I got from Vox. Okay, so Vox.com, record heat, normal, it's hot, hot, hot. All right. That's from Laura Ingraham on her Fox News show. After all, we're in the middle of a season called summer. Now, the thing is, she was being facetious. She was like, oh, everybody's complaining about it's hot. It's summer, right? She's not understanding, or she's trying to make light of the fact that it is a record breaking July, the hottest July on record. Anyway, the fact checks suggest that more than 3,000 temperature records were shattered in the U.S. for the month of July alone, something scientists say would be virtually impossible without human-caused climate. Okay, let's go to forest fires. Nature naturally burns itself off every 11 years with natural disaster forest fires. This comes from Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, who's a Republican from Oklahoma. This is a forest fire. All right, now let's fact check him. It says the severity of wildfires, such as the historic blazes in Canada this year, are fueled by complex conditions, including forest management and drought primed by climate change. Okay. All right. So let's go to the stronger hurricanes. All right. Just a part of life. This is something that is a fact of life in the Sunshine State. This comes from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He said this in a Fox News interview. He goes on to say, I've always rejected the politicization. Did I say that right? Politicization. That's what it says. Of the weather. But the fact check suggests that climate change drives the warming of ocean waters, which provide fuel for more devastating hurricanes and typhoons. All right, so let me go on to the next one here. More Americans are impacted by climate change. 62% of all voters recognize climate change is caused by human activity, according to a Gallup poll from this spring. Yet climate change denial is not only alive and well in the GOP, it's become a lot more insidious and polarizing, said John Cook, a University of Melbourne researcher who has tracked the path of climate disinformation online using artificial intelligence. The GOP's only climate policy is actually bad for the environment. When Representative Bruce Westerman, who was a Republican from Arkansas, first proposed the Trillion Trees Act in 2020, environmentalists said the bill would significantly increase logging across America's federal forests, convert millions of acres into industrial tree plantations, increase global carbon emissions, increased wildfire risk, and harm wildlife and watersheds. The idea was a wolf in sheep's clothing, effectively giving loggers more allowances as long as they planted seedlings, which are decades away from delivering climate benefits. But the GOP has come to champion this idea as their climate plan. So it's important to know that there are people who may even pretend to care about this issue, and they may put something together that sounds good. Trillion trees, if that's what you name it, it sounds great. A trillion more trees, hey, we're good, right? But when you peel back a couple of layers, as I mentioned, it's really just expanding logging. And they do want to plant more trees, but it's just not realistic because the benefit of those trees, we're going to sink a lot further before we get the benefits of those. And right now we need to be climbing out of the ditch. We sink any further that we may hit that point of no return that you mentioned. So we got a couple of minutes left. I do want to ask you what is it that sort of the every person can do with the information that we've discussed on today's show?
So a few things. I'm not going to talk about individual actions because, frankly, I think we're beyond that. Okay. For me, the individual actions I take is more of part of my personal ethic, and helps me be conscious of the environment that I'm in. Sure. But really, when we look at, we need political action. And so when we think about voting, when we think about talking to our legislature, we need to make climate the number one issue. Okay. We need to make sure that our politicians realize that if they're going to be an ostrich with their head in the sand, if they're going to be the emperor who has no clothes and talk about like, oh, climate change doesn't exist. Meanwhile, communities in Alaska are already having to be relocated because they're melting. Yeah. So you can't really deny that. And if you do, again, like you can't be seen as politically feasible. And so we have to make that reality, right? We need to strengthen our democracy by ensuring that communities, that politicians know that this is one of our core issues. And then, there's other things that you can do in terms of like ensuring that we hold corporations accountable. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. There's a lot of different organizations, whether like the Sunrise Movement or other groups like Extinction Rebellion. We really need to hold these corporations accountable. And actually on September 17th, which is during Climate Week in New York, there's going to be a huge mass protest. I'll be there. If you're in New York, you should be there if you're in the area. And we're really trying to, again, hold our politicians responsible, let corporations know more. But it's really important for us to be aware. So increase our awareness, and then also make sure that we're holding our governing and corporations accountable.
Well,